The scream that tore through the abandoned ranch house sent chills down Isaac Quinlan's spine, but it was the silence that followed that made him dismount his horse and draw his revolver. The summer heat of 1883, Arizona beat down mercilessly on the dusty ground around Coolidge, and Isaac had been tracking a band of outlaws for 3 days straight when he stumbled upon the dilapidated property that should have been empty. His instincts as a former Texas Ranger told him something was terribly wrong, and those instincts had kept him alive through more gunfights than he cared to remember. At 27 years old, Isaac had seen enough evil in this world to recognize its presence, and it hung heavy in the air around this place like the oppressive desert heat. He moved carefully through the sagging front door, his boots barely making a sound on the warped floorboards. The main room was empty except for overturned furniture and evidence of a struggle. Blood stained the wooden planks near what looked like a cellar door, and Isaac's jaw tightened as he approached it. The heavy wooden door was bolted from the outside, and he could hear faint sounds coming from below. Without hesitation, he threw the bolt and yanked the door open, descending the narrow stairs with his gun raised. What he found in that cellar would haunt him for weeks to come. A young woman lay crumpled in the corner, her hands bound behind her back with rough rope that had cut into her wrists until they bled. Her ankles were similarly tied, and her face bore the purple and yellow marks of brutal beatings. Her dress was torn and filthy, and she flinched violently when his shadow fell across her, trying to scramble backward even though she had nowhere to go. Her eyes were wide with terror, and Isaac immediately holstered his weapon and raised his hands to show he meant no harm. "Easy now," he said softly, keeping his voice gentle despite the rage burning through his veins at whoever had done this to her. "I am not going to hurt you. Let me help you." She whimpered but did not try to move away as he knelt beside her. Up close, he could see she was younger than he had first thought, probably around 23 or 24, with auburn hair matted with dirt and blood. Her hazel eyes watched him with a mixture of fear and desperate hope as he pulled out his knife. She tensed when she saw the blade, but he moved slowly, letting her see exactly what he was doing as he cut through the ropes binding her wrists. "There you go," he murmured, moving to her ankles and freeing those as well. The ropes had been tied so tightly that her hands and feet were swollen and discolored. He helped her sit up and she gasped in pain, her whole body trembling. "Can you tell me your name?" "Theresa," she whispered, her voice hoarse and cracking. "Theresa Callahan." "Isaac Quinlan," he replied, shrugging off his coat despite the heat and draping it around her shoulders. She clutched it gratefully, and he noticed her fingers were shaking so badly she could barely grip the fabric. "You are safe with me now. Can you stand?" "We need to get you out of here and somewhere I can tend to those wounds." She tried to rise, but her legs gave out immediately. Without asking permission, Isaac scooped her up in his arms, and she made a small sound of surprise but did not protest. She weighed almost nothing, and he realized with growing anger that she had probably been down in that cellar for days without food or water. He carried her up the stairs and out into the blinding sunlight, and she buried her face against his chest, overwhelmed by the brightness after so long in the dark. His horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Copper, waited patiently where Isaac had left him tied to a post. Isaac managed to mount with Theresa still in his arms, settling her carefully in front of him. She sagged against him, her strength completely spent, and he wrapped one arm securely around her waist to keep her steady as he urged Copper into a gentle walk back toward Coolidge. "Who did this to you?" he asked quietly as they rode. He felt her stiffen in his arms. "The Garrett brothers," she said, and Isaac recognized the name immediately. The same outlaws he had been tracking. They took me from the stagecoach 5 days ago, killed the driver and the guard. I was traveling from Tucson to meet my uncle in Phoenix. He owns a general store there and offered me work after my father passed last month. The Garretts are dead, Isaac told her, and felt some of the tension leave her body. I caught up with them yesterday evening. They would not surrender peacefully, and I had no choice but to defend myself. I found a woman's reticule and some other belongings in their camp, but I did not know where you might be. When I saw this place, something told me to investigate. Thank God you did, Theresa whispered. They said they were coming back tonight. They said. Her voice broke and Isaac tightened his arm around her reassuringly. You do not have to tell me, he said. Not now. Maybe not ever if you do not want to. What matters is you are safe now and they cannot hurt you again. They rode in silence for a while, and Isaac felt Theresa gradually relax against him as the reality of her rescue began to sink in. The ride to Coolidge took nearly an hour, and by the time they arrived at the small frontier town, she had drifted into an exhausted sleep. Isaac went directly to the home of Doc Morrison, the closest thing the town had to a proper physician, and knocked urgently on the door. The doctor was a grizzled man in his 50s who had seen his share of frontier violence. He took one look at Theresa and ushered them inside immediately, directing Isaac to lay her on the examination table in his office. Isaac did so reluctantly, not wanting to let her go, which surprised him. He had known this woman for less than 2 hours, but something about her vulnerability and courage stirred protective instincts he had not felt in years. I will need privacy to examine her properly, Doc Morrison said, but his tone was kind. Why do not you go get the sheriff and explain what happened? I will take good care of her, son. Isaac nodded and forced himself to leave, though he glanced back at Theresa's unconscious form several times before he finally made it out the door. He found Sheriff Dawson at his office, filling out paperwork, and spent the next hour giving a detailed account of everything that had happened. The sheriff knew about the Garrett brothers and their crimes, and he was relieved to hear they had been stopped permanently. You did good work, Quinlan, Dawson said, shaking his hand. The territorial marshal will want a full report, but from what you have told me, it was a clean shooting. Self-defense against known criminals with outstanding warrants. As for Miss Callahan, she is welcome to stay in Coolidge as long as she needs to recover. We will send word to her uncle in Phoenix about what happened. Isaac thanked him and made his way back to Doc Morrison's house. He found the doctor in his sitting room, cleaning his spectacles with a handkerchief. The older man looked up as Isaac entered and gestured for him to sit down. She is sleeping now, the doctor said. I gave her something for the pain. The poor girl has been through hell, but she is strong. No broken bones, thankfully, though she has some cracked ribs that will take time to heal. The cuts and bruises will fade. I am more worried about the trauma to her spirit. She is going to need time and patience to recover from what those animals did to her. Did they? Isaac could not finish the question, but Doc Morrison understood. No, he said, and Isaac felt relief flood through him. They beat her, starved her, and terrorized her, but it appears they did not violate her in that way. Small mercies, I suppose, though what they did was horror enough. Where is she now? Isaac asked. Upstairs in my spare room. My wife is sitting with her. You are welcome to wait here, or you can come back tomorrow. She needs rest more than anything right now. Isaac knew he should leave, should find a room at the boarding house and get some rest himself. Instead, he found himself saying, I would like to stay if that is all right, just to make sure she is okay. Doc Morrison studied him with knowing eyes. You are welcome to the sofa, he said finally, but I warn you that girl is going to need more than physical healing. Are you prepared for that? I do not know, Isaac admitted honestly, But I cannot just walk away, not yet. The doctor nodded as if he had expected that answer. You are a good man, Isaac Quinlan. The world needs more men like you. Isaac spent that night on Doc Morrison's uncomfortable sofa, sleeping fitfully and waking at every small sound. The next morning he was up before dawn, and Mrs. Morrison took pity on him and invited him to breakfast. He was just finishing his coffee when he heard footsteps on the stairs. Theresa appeared in the doorway, moving slowly and carefully. She had been cleaned up and dressed in one of Mrs. Morrison's spare dresses, which was slightly too large for her thin frame. The bruises on her face looked even worse in the morning light, but her eyes were clearer than they had been yesterday. You stayed, she said, and there was surprise and something else in her voice. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. I wanted to make sure you were all right, Isaac replied, standing up. He felt suddenly awkward, unsure of what to say or do. How are you feeling? Like I was beaten and left in a cellar for 5 days, she said, but there was a hint of dry humor in her tone that made him smile slightly. But better than yesterday. Doc Morrison says you saved my life. The Garretts were coming back that night, and if you had not found me when you did. She trailed off, swallowing hard. I am just glad I was there, Isaac said. What will you do now? Doc Morrison sent word to your uncle in Phoenix. I suppose I will go to Phoenix when I am well enough to travel, Theresa said, sitting down carefully at the table. Mrs. Morrison bustled over with a plate of eggs and toast, and Theresa ate slowly, as if her stomach had to remember how to accept food. My uncle is the only family I have left. My mother died when I was born, and my father passed last month from pneumonia. The farm in Tucson had to be sold to pay his debts, and I had nothing left. My uncle offered me a position helping in his store. That is kind of him, Isaac said, sitting back down across from her. I have never met him, Theresa admitted. He and my father had some kind of falling out years ago before I was born. But when I wrote to him about my situation, he responded immediately and said I would always have a place with him. I was hoping we could mend whatever rift existed between him and my father. They talked for over an hour, the conversation flowing more easily than Isaac would have expected. Theresa had a sharp mind and a quiet strength that impressed him. Despite everything she had been through, she was not broken. Hurt, certainly, and traumatized, but there was steel in her spine that told him she would survive this. Over the next week, Isaac found himself spending more and more time at Doc Morrison's house. He told himself he was just checking on Theresa's recovery, making sure she had everything she needed. But the truth was that he was drawn to her in a way he could not quite explain. She was beautiful, yes, even with the fading bruises, but it was more than that. She was intelligent and kind, with a quiet sense of humor that emerged more each day as she healed. She asked him about his life, and he found himself telling her things he had never told anyone else. He had been born in Texas, he explained, the youngest of 4 boys. His father had been a rancher, his mother a schoolteacher. He had joined the Texas Rangers at 21, following in his oldest brother's footsteps. He had been good at the work, tracking outlaws and bringing them to justice, but the violence had worn on him. After 5 years, he had resigned and become a freelance tracker, working for various territorial marshals and sheriffs. The pay was less consistent, but he answered to no one but himself. You ever get lonely? Theresa asked one afternoon as they sat on Doc Morrison's porch. She was recovering well, able to walk without pain now, though the cracked ribs still bothered her if she moved too quickly. Sometimes, Isaac admitted. The life I have chosen is not conducive to putting down roots, but I have never been very good at staying in one place for long. Too restless, my mother always said. That sounds lonely to me, Theresa said softly, and something in her tone made Isaac look at her more closely. "What about you?" he asked. "Were you lonely on that farm in Tucson?" "Terribly," she said. "Especially after my father got sick. It was just the two of us, and the neighbors were miles away. I used to dream about living in a real town with people around and things happening. I suppose I should be careful what I wish for." "What happened to you was not your fault," Isaac said firmly. "You know that, right?" "None of it was your fault." "I know," Theresa said, but her eyes were distant. "Sometimes I still wake up in the night back in that cellar, thinking they are coming for me. And then I remember that you found me, that they are dead, that I am safe. But it takes a while for my heart to stop pounding." Without thinking, Isaac reached over and took her hand. She looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face, and something passed between them that neither of them was quite ready to name yet. "You are safe," he said quietly. "I promise you that." "I believe you," she whispered, and she squeezed his hand gently before letting go. 2 days later, a letter arrived from Theresa's uncle in Phoenix. Isaac watched as she read it, her expression growing more and more distressed. When she finished, she looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "He says he cannot take me in after all," she said, her voice shaking. "His wife is ill and they cannot afford another mouth to feed. He is very sorry for the inconvenience, but he is sure I will understand." Isaac felt anger rise in his chest. "Some family," he muttered. "What will you do now?" "I do not know," Theresa admitted, wiping at her eyes. "I have no money, no family, nowhere to go. I suppose I will have to find work here in Coolidge, though I do not know what kind of work I am qualified for. I can read and write and do basic arithmetic. I can cook and sew. Perhaps someone needs a housekeeper or a cook." "You could stay with me," Isaac said, and the words were out before he had really thought them through. Theresa looked at him in shock, and he hurried to clarify. "I mean, I have been thinking of settling down somewhere. I have some money saved from my years with the Rangers and my work since then. I could buy some land, start a small ranch. Nothing fancy, but enough to make a living. I would need help running it, and you need a place to stay. It could be a business arrangement." "A business arrangement," Theresa repeated slowly, and Isaac could not quite read her expression. "Unless you do not want to," he said quickly. "I would not blame you if you did not. I am just trying to offer you an option." "Why would you do that for me?" Theresa asked. "You barely know me." Isaac looked at her for a long moment, trying to find the right words. "Because I cannot stand the thought of you being alone and struggling when I could help," he said finally. "Because in the week I have known you, you have become important to me. Because I think we could build something good together." "What if I become a burden?" Theresa asked quietly. "What if the nightmares never stop? What if I am too damaged to be of any use to anyone?" Isaac moved his chair closer to hers and took both her hands in his. "You are not damaged," he said fiercely. "You are a survivor, and I do not believe for one second that you would be a burden. Say yes, Theresa. Let me help you. Let us help each other." She searched his face for a long time, and he let her, having nothing to hide. Finally, she nodded. "All right," she said. "Yes. Thank you, Isaac." The relief that flooded through him was almost overwhelming. Over the next few weeks, Isaac threw himself into the practical work of establishing a homestead. He found a good piece of land about 5 miles outside Coolidge, near a reliable water source. It had a small cabin that needed work but was structurally sound, and enough acreage for cattle and crops. He bought the land outright, along with some basic livestock and supplies, and began the process of turning it into a working ranch. Theresa stayed with the Morrisons while Isaac worked on making the cabin livable. He repaired the roof, fixed the windows, and built a proper stove. He made sure there was a door that locked securely, knowing that Theresa would need to feel safe. He built a second bedroom onto the cabin, wanting her to have her own space and privacy. He worked from dawn until well after dark, driven by a need to create a home for both of them. When he finally brought Theresa out to see the place, he was nervous in a way he had not been nervous in years. She walked through the cabin slowly, taking in the clean floors, the sturdy furniture, the cheerful curtains that Mrs. Morrison had helped him pick out. She went into the bedroom he had built for her and stood there for a long moment, looking at the bed with its handmade quilt, the small dresser, the window that looked out over the desert landscape. "It is perfect," she said finally, turning to face him with tears in her eyes. "Isaac, this is more than I ever could have hoped for. Thank you." "You are welcome," he said, feeling his throat tighten with emotion. "I want you to be happy here, Theresa. I want this to feel like home." They fell into a routine over the following weeks. Isaac worked the ranch, tending to the cattle and horses, making repairs and improvements. Theresa took over the domestic tasks, cooking and cleaning and managing their household. They were careful around each other at first, both aware of the unconventional nature of their arrangement. But gradually, they grew more comfortable in each other's presence. Isaac discovered that Theresa had a gift for healing. She started a small garden near the cabin, growing herbs and vegetables, and she knew how to make remedies for various ailments. When one of the horses developed a bad cough, she mixed up a tonic that had the animal recovering within days. When Isaac cut his hand badly on a piece of wire, she cleaned and bandaged it with steady hands, her touch gentle but confident. Theresa discovered that Isaac was more than just a tough tracker. He had a gentle side that he rarely showed the world. He was patient with the animals, even when they were difficult. He carved small wooden figures in the evenings, his hands surprisingly deft with the knife. He had a rich baritone voice and would sometimes sing old ballads while he worked, filling the air with music. They talked for hours in the evenings, sitting on the porch and watching the sun set over the desert. Theresa told him about growing up on the farm, about her father and his struggles after her mother died. Isaac told her about his brothers, about the cases he had worked as a ranger, about the places he had seen and the people he had met. They argued sometimes, usually about trivial things like the best way to organize the barn or whether they needed more chickens. But the arguments never lasted long and always ended with laughter. Summer turned to autumn, and the brutal Arizona heat gave way to cooler temperatures. Isaac taught Theresa how to ride properly, and they would take long rides across their land, Isaac pointing out the boundaries of their property and discussing his plans for expansion. Theresa proved to be a natural rider, fearless despite her ordeal, and Isaac loved watching her grow more confident in the saddle. One evening in late October, they were riding back to the cabin after checking on the cattle in the far pasture. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and Theresa pulled her horse to a stop on top of a small rise. Isaac stopped beside her, following her gaze across the landscape. "I never thought I would feel safe again," she said softly. "After what happened, I thought I would always be afraid. But here, with you, I feel like I can breathe again, like I can start to imagine a future." Isaac felt his heart start to pound in his chest. Over the past few months, his feelings for Theresa had deepened into something he could no longer deny. He had fallen in love with her, completely and irrevocably. He loved her strength and her kindness, her intelligence and her humor. He loved the way she hummed while she cooked, the way she laughed at his terrible jokes, the way she looked at him sometimes as if he was the best thing that had ever happened to her. "Theresa," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion, "I need to tell you something." She turned to look at him, her hazel eyes questioning. In the fading light she was beautiful, and Isaac felt his breath catch in his throat. When I said this was a business arrangement, I was not being entirely honest, he continued. Or maybe I was lying to myself. The truth is, I have fallen in love with you. I think I started falling the moment I found you in that cellar and saw the courage in your eyes even through all that fear. These past months have been the happiest of my life, and I cannot imagine my future without you in it. I know you might not feel the same way, and if you do not, that is all right. I will never pressure you or make you uncomfortable, but I had to tell you the truth. Theresa was staring at him, her eyes wide and her lips parted in surprise. For a long moment she did not say anything, and Isaac felt panic start to rise in his chest. He had ruined everything. He had pushed too hard, too fast, and now she would leave and he would lose her forever. Then she smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "You foolish man," she said, but her tone was tender. "Did you really think I did not know? Did you think I did not feel the same way you do?" Isaac asked, hardly daring to believe it. "Of course I do," Theresa said. "I have been in love with you for weeks now, maybe longer. I just did not think you could possibly feel the same way about someone like me, someone broken and damaged." "You are not broken," Isaac said fiercely, urging his horse closer to hers until their legs were almost touching. "You are the strongest, bravest woman I have ever met. I love you, Theresa Callahan. I want to marry you if you will have me. I want to build a life with you, a real life, not just a business arrangement. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want children with you if you want them. I want everything." Theresa was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling through them. "Yes," she said. "Yes to all of it. I want that too. I want you, Isaac Quinlan. I want the life we can build together." Isaac dismounted quickly and helped Theresa down from her horse. As soon as her feet touched the ground, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her. She kissed him back with a passion that matched his own, her hands coming up to tangle in his hair. They stood there on that hillside, holding each other as the sun set around them, and Isaac felt something in his chest unlock and settle into place. This was what he had been searching for all these years without even knowing it, not adventure or justice or glory, but this. A home, a partner, love. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Coolidge. Doc Morrison gave Theresa away, and Mrs. Morrison cried happy tears throughout the entire service. Sheriff Dawson served as Isaac's best man, and half the town turned out to celebrate with them. It was a modest affair, but it was perfect, and when Isaac looked at Theresa in her simple white dress, he thought she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Their wedding night was tender and patient. Isaac was careful with her, knowing that physical intimacy might be difficult after what she had been through. But Theresa was not afraid, not with him, and she welcomed his touch with a trust that humbled him. They learned each other slowly, taking their time, and afterward, Theresa fell asleep in his arms with a smile on her face. The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. Theresa still had nightmares sometimes, waking up gasping and disoriented, and Isaac would hold her until she calmed down, reminding her that she was safe. The ranch demanded constant work, and there were setbacks. A harsh winter storm killed several head of cattle, and a drought the following summer threatened their crops. Money was tight, and there were times when they went to bed hungry so the livestock could be fed. But through it all, they had each other. They worked side by side, facing every challenge as a team. When things were hard, they held onto each other and refused to give up. And slowly, gradually, things began to improve. The ranch started to turn a profit. They were able to hire a young man named Charlie to help with the heavy work. Theresa's garden flourished, and she began selling her herbs and remedies in town, bringing in extra income. On their first anniversary, Isaac surprised Theresa with a gift he had been working on for months. It was a beautiful wooden chest, intricately carved with scenes of the desert landscape they both loved. Inside, he had placed a deed to an additional 100 acres of land adjacent to their property, which he had purchased with money he had been carefully saving. "For our future," he said as she opened it with tears in her eyes. "For the family we will build and the life we will create together." 2 months later, Theresa told him she was pregnant. Isaac was overwhelmed with joy and terror in equal measure. He worried constantly about her health, about the baby, about whether he would be a good father. But Theresa was calm and confident, assuring him that everything would be fine. Doc Morrison checked on her regularly and pronounced her healthy and strong. Their son was born on a warm spring evening in 1885, arriving with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the world. They named him James, after Isaac's father, and from the moment Isaac held that tiny, squirming bundle in his arms, he understood love in a way he never had before. He looked at Theresa, exhausted but radiant in the bed, and felt his heart expand to encompass both of them. James was a healthy, happy baby who grew quickly. He had his mother's hazel eyes and his father's dark hair, and he was curious about everything. As he grew into a toddler, he followed Isaac everywhere, wanting to help with every task on the ranch. Isaac was patient with him, teaching him about the animals and the land, and Theresa would watch them together with a soft smile on her face. When James was 2 years old, Theresa became pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, after Theresa's mother. Rose was quieter than her brother, with blonde curls and Isaac's blue eyes, and she had her father wrapped around her little finger from day one. Isaac, who had once been a hardened tracker capable of bringing down dangerous outlaws, turned into a complete softy when it came to his daughter. He would spend hours playing tea party with her or reading her stories, and Theresa would tease him gently about it. The ranch continued to prosper. By 1890, they had expanded their holdings significantly and built a larger house to accommodate their growing family. The original cabin became a bunkhouse for their hired hands. They had a thriving herd of cattle, several good horses, and Theresa's herb business had grown so much that she was supplying several towns across the territory. Isaac had long since given up tracking work. He had no desire to return to that life, not when he had everything he wanted right here. He was a rancher now, a husband, a father, and he had never been happier. Sometimes he would think back to that day in 1883 when he had heard a scream and investigated an abandoned ranch house. If he had ridden past, if he had arrived even an hour later, his entire life would have been different. But he had not ridden past. He had trusted his instincts, and they had led him to Theresa. They had led him to this life, this family, this happiness. One evening when James was 8 and Rose was 6, the family sat together on the porch of their home, watching the sunset. It had become a tradition over the years, this quiet time together at the end of the day. James was telling them about a bird nest he had found, his words tumbling over each other in his excitement. Rose was curled up against Isaac's side, nearly asleep. Theresa sat in the rocking chair Isaac had built for her, her hand resting on her stomach. She was pregnant again, due in the fall, and they were both hoping for another girl this time. "Tell us the story, Papa," Rose said suddenly, looking up at Isaac with sleepy eyes. "Tell us how you and Mama met." Isaac looked at Theresa, and she smiled and nodded. They had told the children a simplified version of the story before, leaving out the worst parts but keeping the essential truth. That their father had saved their mother's life, and that was how their love story had begun. "Well," Isaac began, pulling Rose closer and gesturing for James to come sit on his other side. It was a hot summer day in 1883, and I was tracking some bad men through the Arizona desert. I came across an old ranch house that should have been empty, but something told me to investigate. "What told you?" James asked, even though he knew this part of the story by heart. "My instincts," Isaac said. "The same instincts that tell you when a storm is coming or when a horse is about to spook. I went into that house and I found a cellar door. When I opened it, there was your mother and she was in trouble, but she was brave and strong even then. I cut her ropes and picked her up and I said to her, 'You are safe with me now.' And she was safe," Rose said dreamily, "because you are the strongest, bravest papa in the whole world." "Your mother is the brave one," Isaac corrected gently. "I just got lucky enough to find her. And then I got even luckier because she agreed to marry me." "I was the lucky one," Theresa said softly, meeting Isaac's eyes across the porch. After all these years, that look still made his heart skip a beat. "I was lost and alone, and you gave me a home. You gave me a family. You gave me a life I never thought I would have. We gave each other those things," Isaac said. "That is what love is, I think. Not one person saving the other, but two people choosing each other every day and building something beautiful together." James made a face at the mushiness of this statement, but Rose sighed happily. Theresa laughed and stood up, walking over to Isaac and bending down to kiss him softly. "I would choose you every time," she whispered against his lips. "In every lifetime I would choose you." "And I would find you every time," Isaac replied. "No matter how long it took or how far I had to search, I would always find you." As the sun finally disappeared below the horizon and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the Quinlan family sat together in comfortable silence. They had weathered storms and hardships, had faced challenges and overcome them. They had built a life from nothing, had created a family from two broken people who found each other at exactly the right moment. Isaac thought about that young man he had been, restless and searching without knowing what he was searching for. He thought about Theresa, terrified and hurt in that dark cellar, not knowing if she would live or die. And he marveled at how far they had both come, at what they had created together. "I love you," he said to Theresa, needing her to hear it even though he told her every day. "I love you too," she replied, her hand finding his and squeezing gently. Their children were healthy and happy. Their ranch was successful. They had friends and community and a place in the world. But more than any of that, they had each other, and they always would. Years passed, and the Quinlan family continued to grow and thrive. Their third child, another daughter they named Sarah, was born in the fall of 1890 as expected. The children grew up surrounded by love and security, never knowing the hardships their parents had faced before they found each other. James eventually took over management of the ranch, proving to have a natural talent for both the business side and the physical work. Rose became a teacher, opening a small school in Coolidge for the children of ranching families. Sarah, the youngest, became a skilled healer like her mother, and together they ran a clinic that served the entire region. Isaac and Theresa grew old together on the ranch they had built. Their hair turned gray, their faces lined with wrinkles earned from years of smiling and laughing together. Isaac's body bore the scars of his old life as a tracker, and Theresa's hands showed the marks of decades of hard work. But they were happy, deeply and completely happy, in a way that neither of them had ever imagined possible during those dark days in 1883. On warm evenings, they would still sit together on the porch, holding hands and watching the sunset, just as they had done for decades. They would talk about their children and grandchildren, about the ranch and the community they had helped build. But sometimes they would fall into comfortable silence, needing no words to communicate the depth of their love and contentment. You ever think about that day? Theresa asked one evening when they were both well into their 60s. The day you found me. Every single day, Isaac replied honestly. It was the day my real life began. Mine too, Theresa said. Sometimes I still cannot believe how lucky we were. How lucky I was that you decided to investigate that house, that you heard something and chose to look. It was not luck, Isaac said firmly. It was meant to be. We were meant to find each other, meant to build this life together. I believe that with everything in me. So do I, Theresa agreed, leaning her head against his shoulder. You saved my life that day, Isaac, not just from the garrets, but from despair, from loneliness. You gave me a reason to keep going, to keep fighting, to believe that good things were still possible. You saved me too, Isaac told her, kissing the top of her head. I was drifting before I met you, never staying in one place, never forming real connections. You taught me what it means to have a home. You taught me what it means to love and be loved. They sat in silence for a while, watching as their grandson played in the yard with the family dog, a descendant of the first dog they had owned decades ago. The sound of laughter and barking filled the air, along with the lowing of cattle in the distance and the gentle rustle of wind through the desert grass. We did good, did we not? Theresa said softly. With our life together, with our family, we did good. We did better than good, Isaac replied. We did something remarkable. We took pain and fear and turned it into love and happiness. We created something that will last long after we are gone. Our children, our grandchildren, this ranch, this community. It is our legacy, built on the foundation of choosing each other every single day. I would do it all again, Theresa said. Every hard moment, every challenge, every struggle, it was all worth it to end up here with you. So would I, Isaac agreed. 1,000 times over I would choose this life, I would choose you. As the sun set on another day, painting the Arizona sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, Isaac and Theresa Quinlan sat together on their porch, surrounded by the life they had built. They had come so far from that terrible day in 1883, from the cellar and the fear and the pain. They had transformed their trauma into triumph, their suffering into strength. They had found each other in the darkness, and together they had created light. And that light would continue to shine through their children and grandchildren, through the ranch they had built and the community they had helped establish, through every life they had touched and every heart they had changed. It was not the ending Isaac had imagined for himself all those years ago when he was a restless young tracker. It was not the life Theresa had dreamed of when she was a lonely girl on a farm in Tucson. But it was so much better than anything either of them could have imagined. It was real and hard-won and precious beyond measure. And as they sat there together, hands intertwined and hearts beating in sync after decades of shared life, they knew that they had found something rare and beautiful. They had found true love, the kind that endures through hardship and grows stronger with time. The kind that transforms lives and creates legacies. The kind that proves, beyond any doubt, that even in the darkest moments, hope and healing are possible. Isaac Quinlan had walked into that cellar expecting to find death. Instead, he had found life. He had found his purpose, his partner, his forever. And Theresa Callahan, beaten and bound and terrified, had looked up to see her salvation walking down those stairs. She had heard the words that would change everything, words she would remember for the rest of her long and happy life. You are safe with me now. And she had been. She had been safe and loved and cherished every single day from that moment forward. Their story, which had begun in darkness and fear, had blossomed into something beautiful and lasting. It was a testament to the power of love, the strength of the human spirit, and the possibility of redemption and healing even after the worst trauma. Years later, when they were both gone, their children would tell their story to their grandchildren, and they would tell it to their children in turn. The story of Isaac and Theresa Quinlan, who found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built a love that lasted a lifetime. The story of a cowboy who heard a cry for help and chose to investigate. The story of a woman who survived the unthinkable and found the courage to love again. It was a story of the Wild West, of danger and hardship and violence. But more than that, it was a story of hope, of healing, of two people who refused to let their circumstances define them, who chose instead to define themselves through their love for each other and the family they created together. And it was a story with a happy ending, the kind that reminds us that even in the darkest times, light can be found. That love can heal even the deepest wounds. That choosing each other every single day is the greatest adventure of all. The Quinlan Ranch still stands today, run by descendants of Isaac and Theresa who carry on their legacy of hard work, integrity, and love. And on warm evenings, when the sun sets over the Arizona desert in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, some say you can still feel their presence there on that porch, still holding hands, still watching the sunset together, still choosing each other, even beyond death, in the beautiful life they built together.